this chapter, we will have a look at how best to manage end users when building and planning for scale. When managing large workflows and taking the time to consider prioritizations in your board for scalability, we also recommend taking steps to ensure that your work is not undone by the end users of the workflow. This includes permissions, standardizing the account, creating predetermined views, creating processes for requesting changes, and having a sandbox workspace for your users. Permissions. Setting permissions can either be done on an account or board level. The most obvious way to manage how users interact with your workflow is through permissions. For enterprise customers, permissions can be applied on the account, workspace, board, column, and item level. For non-enterprise, board and column level permissions are available. You can also define which users can edit or add automations. For example, enterprise admins or workspace owners can add account or workspace permissions to restrict who can create automations. Let's take a look at an example in monday.com. For example, you might want to prevent users from adding more columns to the board, and you can add a board permission that says, edit the board's content without changing its structure. You can learn more about permissions in the account governance course within the Customer Academy. Standardization. Standardizing boards also prevents end users from undoing your hard work in a way which may be less restrictive than permissions. Some ways you can use standardization to ensure that unwanted changes are not being made include setting board defaults. Let's take a quick look at how this can be done within monday.com. You can find this within the admin section of your account. If you head over to the customization, right over here. Standardizing status labels will provide a better user experience when adding new status columns to boards. This will also be important where boards feed into dashboards which report on statuses, as you won't want new labels to be created by other users each time a status column is added. As well as setting board defaults, you can also create column and board templates. These can both be created within the board settings itself. Let's take a quick look how. For column templates, you can find this within the column settings itself. And it is another way to keep uniformity when new columns are added, for example, with drop-down labels within drop-down columns. You can also create a board template right over here in the More Actions. And you can easily save any board as a template. Building standardized structures, which also include automations, are also good practice for ensuring that new boards added to the workflow are also built with scale in mind. Next, create predetermined views. In order to ensure that the users have what they need in order to best use the board and prevent the need for them to be adding or building anything on top of it, you may also want to create views ahead of time to help them better navigate the boards. Let's take a quick look at an example in monday.com. As I'm sure you already know, you can create any views you want from our view center or using our filter. But just to give you an example of one, you can use the Me dynamic. And this view will create a view where everyone can see the items which are assigned to them. This one view is then valuable to everyone rather than having users create their own personal view. Build a process for making changes. Whether or not you have set up permissions within the board or the account itself, you might also want to consider putting a formal process in place for users to request to add things to the workflow, such as views, automations, and integrations. For example, this can be done through a feedback form with your team. Additionally, you may want to give responsibility to a group of users to then govern the boards. This will help with the long-term maintenance of them. And lastly, you can create a sandbox workspace. You may also find it useful to create a workspace within the account to act as a playground or a testing ground for users to play in so they don't mess with the boards that are actually in use. So, since we have now covered how best to build your workflows for scale, we will be exploring maintaining and managing larger workflows in the following chapter, in Chapter 6.